This fall, I'm excited to enjoy one of Philly's most walkable neighborhoods that goes car-free during Open Streets, West Walnut. On Sundays starting September 7th through October 12th, everyone can shop, stroll, and socialize along 7 city blocks of pedestrian-friendly space in Center City, including sections of West Walnut and 18th Streets. There's going to be outdoor dining, live entertainment, and retail promotions. It's really a peaceful way to enjoy this expansion of public space. For more details, head over to centercityphila.org/open streets. For more details, head over to centercityphila.org/open streets. This week, we're launching a special series on the history and future of Philly's most iconic street. You've probably danced and shopped on South Street. You may have drank and eaten a cheesesteak on South Street, or walked with friends up and down South Street. This one-lane, one-way strip from the Schuylkill to the Delaware rivers has seen Philly history happen. There's been riots and near destruction at the hands of city planners, and legends of art and music brought life to these blocks. Its past includes joy and sorrow, resurgence and setbacks, and that still characterizes Philly today. So for the next 3 days on CityCast Philly, we're exploring the many blocks of this corridor and its complex history, going back centuries. It's Monday, September 8th. I'm Trenae Nuri. Come hang with me on South Street.
Here's the South Street guys.
Cheers.
The CityCast Philly team and I are sitting at a table at Tattooed Moms, a bar on South Street between 5th and 6th Streets. We're sitting upstairs. The walls are covered in stickers and posters. And oh yeah, we put ours up there too. We're here talking about our favorite memories on South Street. I'm sitting across from executive producer Matt Katz. Next to me is producer Abby Fritz, and across the table is Siani Cologne, our Hey Philly newsletter editor.
South Street to me is like where I first hung out when I first came to Philly, when I first moved to Philly, and for me it's covered the breadth of my experience as a Philadelphian. You know, when I lived in the neighborhood a few blocks away, I used to go food shopping on South Street. There's the Whole Foods now, and there used to be a cheaper supermarket across the street. It's where I went out to see music. The TLA have spent so many nights there. More recently, Milk Boy. I got my first 2 tattoos on South Street. I mean, how many people do you think got their first tattoos on South Street? right? And to me, it is our city's most iconic street. It's the place where you go if you're not from here and you're visiting. It's the place you go if you're from like the burbs and are coming in on a Friday or Saturday night. It's the place you go if you're a teenager and want to like go to Condom Kingdom and giggle a little bit or buy a bong. And there's just a mix of everybody here. And it's been like this destination since colonial times. And I think that's what's cool as hell about it. There's something in the DNA of this place that I think makes it the most quintessential Philadelphia strip.
Yeah, coming back to Tattooed Moms, it holds a lot of special memories in my heart. I celebrated my 21st birthday here.
Aww.
And I definitely felt so cool just being able to flash my ID and just chill and hang out here with my friends. I remember my first legal drink was the Cosmo Cloud, which was pink, fruity, and fluffy with the cotton candy. But a lot of my memories with South Street are definitely associated with childhood. Just remembering just going down on the weekends with my family, and we'd either start or cap the day at Penn's Landing and then spend a good portion of it just walking around South Street, looking at all the different shops. I loved going into Mineralistic and looking at all the crystals. Definitely had a crystal phase at one point. And stopping in Garland of Letters, which I still feel a sense of peace and calm as soon as I walk through the doors and past that lion. And I love like the little shop cat that's there as well, and just being able to have that little fluffy company. And yeah, just eating at Copa Banana, the live music that would be on the street at times. I remember taking a picture one time with a Michael Jackson impersonator. And I love going to Philly AIDS Thrift any chance I can get. Even if I don't wind up buying something, it just always feels like a sense of adventure every time I go in there, because you never know what you're going to find.
Mm-hmm. I always find a different room.
Yeah, South Street has great thrifting. South Street introduced me to like independence. So this is where me and my friends, we would walk down from the L, walk all the way down to 4th, go to Jim's. That's where I had one of my first cheesesteaks. Then, I continued my independence through college. My roommate and I, we would go shopping for party outfits. Lots of shopping on South Street. And then, you would see guys on motorcycles, blasting music. But South Street too, like you said, Matt, South Street is also like this magnet for Philadelphians and tourists.
Yeah.
And so it's a mix of people, and tourists would be waiting outside like 1950s nostalgic diner, Johnny Rockets. You remember that?
Love that place.
It doesn't exist anymore, but and then people would get the big ass pizza slices from Lorenzo's.
No doubt.
But it literally didn't matter what time of year it is. South Street was always popping. It doesn't even matter like what day of the week. You're gonna see some weird stuff. Mm-hmm. Someone's gonna be partying, drunk somewhere. And the fashions, like I said before, I think growing up, this was like the early 2000s. It was all about what you're wearing down on South Street.
South Street was one of the first places I was taken the first time I visited Philly.
First impressions?
I mean, I'm here. I live here now. So it couldn't have done that bad.
We got him.
Yeah, you got me. And I think like the solidifying event that I was like, oh, I got to move here was like 10 p.m. on a Friday. And we're walking down South Street. And there's two guys on horseback with a boombox, and we're just so like Philly. On the way to the club, and they were just across the street, and I was like, oh my god, and they were like, relax. All my friends were like, calm down, it's not that serious. So but good. That's when I knew. I was like, okay, this is just weird enough, this is just fun enough. I love that South Street very much reveals, I think, a lot of the cracks and crevices of the city in a very positive way.
The history, the people, the businesses, it's so much. So why are we even here? Why are we even talking about South Street?
Well, we wanted to do a series of shows looking at the history of South Street, because it is fascinating, and there's been plenty of ups and downs. I mean, the first theater in the country was down the block from where we are right now. I mean, you have Head House Square, which is from the colonial era. You have this compelling political history where you had fights over civil rights going back to the mid-1800s happening on these blocks. And then a fight 100 years after that over an attempt to blow up South Street and put an expressway here. So I think it's such a microcosm for the city itself, and for the experiences that people living in a urban center have as they relate to the culture and the government and everything else.
But first, before we even get deeper than that, South Street wasn't even called South Street. It was Cedar. This is part 1 of our South Street series. The area that we now call South Street was home to the Lenape people. The indigenous community had called Eastern Pennsylvania home for thousands of years. And they called the Delaware River, which passes next to what we now know as South Street, the river of human beings. By the 1600s, the Lenape encountered European settlers from Sweden, the Netherlands, and Finland. These early settlers also included Black people from Africa and the Caribbean who were enslaved and brought to this area and forced into labor. William Penn was granted the area by England's King Charles II in 1681. In Penn's original plan for Philadelphia, South Street was known as Cedar Street. It was the city's southern border, separating Philadelphia from rural townships to the south. We spoke to Richardson Dilworth about this. Now, if you're a Philadelphian, you've probably heard the name. That's because his namesake and grandfather was mayor of Philadelphia in the 1950s and 1960s. He made history in our city, and now his grandson studies it. Richardson Dilworth is a professor of politics at Drexel University.
It really is amazing the impact of history, the long sort of historical trajectories that you can see reflected on South Street. I think one of the most important elements about South Street is that it was the boundary between the city of Philadelphia and on the east side, Moyamensing, and then a series of other municipalities, small municipalities that served as that borderline. That traditionally gave South Street a unique sort of cultural character. Now, I don't know how true this is, but you can find genuine testimony about this of saying that part of the thing that South Street offered was that you could cross the street and not get arrested by the police force in one municipality because their jurisdiction ended on one side of South Street. Of course, the main economic engine for this place was the Delaware River. So no one was interested in going to the Schuylkill River. And so instead of this sort of orderly progression of country estates, what you got was a lot of dense concentration right along the river that spilled well beyond the northern and southern boundaries of the official city. So you had Philadelphia County and some of the surrounding counties already. And the population immediately spreads north and south along the Delaware River. And so that gives you Southwark and Northern Liberties. And by the 18th century, the area that's now Old City had become a really important financial center. And it became early on as well an important manufacturing hub and textiles and higher end stuff like chemicals and dyes and medical supplies. And of course, this also had shipyards. So you had a big working class population. And like in most places, that working class population was what tended to locate at the sort of lower value land periphery. A lot of the housing stock in those areas comes from a later period, but it still reflects that manufacturing, the high density working class manufacturing populations.
And so working class Philadelphians were living around the street. By the early 1800s, these merchants, tailors and silversmiths, wanted to get their groceries closer to home rather than go blocks north to Market Street. And at the time, that was known as High Street. So what we now call Head House Square on 2nd and South Streets was born. Merchants sold meats, cured fish, produce, and even imported fruits like oranges. The area was diverse. By this time, free Black Americans had come north and moved into South Street to be near Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. We all call this Mother Bethel. It was the first AME church in the country. In 1854, the city was expanded to include the area south of Cedar Street, and Cedar was renamed South Street. And the fight for rights for all of the residents of the area heated up. After the break, we'll talk more about the fight for freedom for Black Americans in Philadelphia and the activist history along South Street. Stick around. The Pottery Spottery, a paint-your-own pottery studio, is now open. The studio is located at 1805 East Passyunk Avenue. It's fun and easy. Simply choose an item to paint, like a gnome, a mug, a unicorn, or a flower pot. You can choose your favorite colors and then paint. They have over 100 items to choose from, starting at just $15. One price includes time in the studio, everything you need to create, and firing of your masterpiece in their kiln. The Pottery Spottery fires your creation for you, so don't worry about that. You don't need a reservation, and you can actually reserve their large back room for parties. The grand opening is Friday, September 12th. Learn more at thepotteryspottery.com. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Kidney cancer is one of the most common types of childhood cancer. The Kidney Center Association is committed to creating awareness and raising funds for research to find a cure through Chalk Your Walk. Kids, artists, and anyone with a heart for kids can raise awareness for childhood kidney cancer by chalking up their pavement with messages of hope. Find out more at chalkyourwalk.org. For me, mornings are chaos. Getting the kids ready for school, squeezing in a 4-mile walk before my production meeting, grabbing my Huel Black Edition saves my mornings. I used to get hangry and reach for several cups of coffee before, but now I actually feel satisfied and on my game in the mornings. Fall is coming up. School and work are ramping up. Life is busy for all of us. I get it. You get it. Time is tough to come by, especially to get a meal that helps you towards your goals. Fortunately, Huel gets it too. It's spelled Huel. Their Black Edition powder is a complete meal, so you feel full, focused, and ready for the day. At less than $3 per meal, it's packed with 40 grams of plant protein and 27 essential vitamins and minerals. No added sugar, it's gluten-free, tastes great, with flavors like vanilla, salted caramel, and chocolate. Plus, it keeps me full for hours. It's perfect for breakfast, lunch, or post-workout. And just when you thought Huel had everything covered, they've just dropped a first-of-its-kind super greens drink in a can. It's called the Huel Daily Greens Ready to Drink. Forget the powders, forget the pills. There's no mixing, no mess. It's quick and convenient without compromising nutrients. It's sparkling and it comes in flavors like blueberry, apple, and peach. 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories, 4 grams of fiber, 1 gram of sugar. Made by dietitians. Try Huel with 15% off for new customers today using my code Philly at Huel.com/Philly. Fuel your best performance with Huel today.
I got to thinking about South Street and how today, it's full of life. It's got high-end housing. It's got a great pet store. It's got clubs. It's got restaurants. It's got a great big Whole Foods. And I thought about how in the 19th century, particularly, say, 1830s into the 1870s, you want to try to imagine that place in our city as a battlefield.
That's Dan Biddle, former reporter and editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's the co-author of Tasting Freedom, Octavius Catto and the Battle for Equality in Civil War America.
And not necessarily a battle where all the fighting and violence and defeats and victories are visible right away, but a battlefield nonetheless, where all through that part of that century and beyond, people fought battles for basic equal rights, fought to defeat slavery and all its atrocities, fought to win rights that we lucky modern Americans take for granted. The right to ride on a streetcar, the right to enlist in the army, the right to get a decent education, and last but not least, the right to vote. All those battles were fought sooner or later in that place.
The right to freedom was staked right here on South Street. The first spot that Harriet Tubman reached in the North was a house just off of South Street, where she connected with abolitionists William and Letitia Still. The home became a spot on the Underground Railroad, but the end of slavery didn't end the fight.
People didn't call marches back then. They called them parades. A huge parade in Philadelphia in April of 1870. Fanny Jackson Coppin, the incredible education hero who was leading the Institute for Colored Youth by then, closed school that day, reasoning that kids and their families would learn more from taking part in that parade, as people said back then, than what they'd be learning in the classroom. and thousands of people, thousands of black people, probably 100 of their best white allies, insanely courageous white people like Lucretia Mott, marched all through our city for 5 miles in 5 hours to celebrate and ratify the right to vote. And of course, that was not a safe march. Like the modern civil rights marches, some white people watching that march reacted by throwing rocks or shouting insults or even firing weapons at the marchers. But they marched on for 5 hours and finally gathered in a great big hall to celebrate and sort of make a statement about this newly won right to vote.
One of the leaders of that march to affirm Black men's right to vote was Octavius V. Catto, who fought for racial justice both before and after the Civil War. He helped recruit Black soldiers to the Union Army and worked to desegregate streetcars alongside his fiancée, Caroline LeCount. Before making activism his life mission, he attended the Institute for Colored Youth, a school right around the corner from South Street. He graduated top of his class and then went on to teach English and math at the school.
Thanks to a handful of wealthy, well-intended Quakers in the early 19th century, money was put aside to create a Black school. And at first, the wealthy Quakers who put some money into it wanted it to be a school where a child of color could learn farming or broom making or the mechanical arts. And Black parents in Philadelphia, even as early as the 1840s and 50s, parents like Octavius Catto's dad, William Catto, who was a preacher who preached from a number of churches along the South Street corridor, insisted that what they wanted that school to do was teach their kids, was to arm their kids with the weapons they would need to navigate a racist, unequal American society, to learn reading and writing, to learn the classics, to learn rhetoric. One of the great young principals of the school that came out of that was notorious for insisting that every pupil who graduated not only be able to recite mathematical tables, solve geometry problems, translate Greek and Spanish and German, but be able to get up and argue their case on their feet. The Institute for Colored Youth, what an amazing place. And if anyone in your audience is not familiar with that building or its history, it's a great stop if you're walking around the South Street area. It's in the 900 block of Bainbridge Street, just a block south of South. When we were trying to write the opening scene of our book, we tried to stick the reader right on South Street. Middle of the afternoon of October 10th, 1871, the date that is inscribed on a big object at the Catto statue, an object representing a ballot box. On that day, as Catto and other Black men and women worked to turn out Black voters for only the second election, the white powers that be fought back. And of course, they had police, most of the police on their side. All that morning, there were scenes of Black men lining up early in the morning to vote, most of them for the first time, being attacked by thugs, attacked by uniformed city police officers, to the point where one judge, fortunately a guy with an open mind, running an election day court, just like we have in Philadelphia elections today, noticed that the witnesses being brought in front of him from the jail were Black men who were arrested on one charge or another, but when they got to his courtroom, they were still bleeding from wounds they had suffered at the hands of Philadelphia police officers and white Democratic operatives because they lined up to vote. Because on that day, the vision of equal Black political power, the rhetoric of it, the hope for it, became the reality. And that was more than the powers that be could take.
That day, Catto was shot 3 times at the intersection of 9th and South Streets while on his way to exercise his right to vote. He died from his injuries. Frank Kelly, the white man who shot Caddo, was never convicted.
A lot of things were defeated that day. A great leader of Black voting rights, of Black education, of the Black community, fell to white gunfire at an early age. He was only 32 years old. But, we know from all the histories of great social crusades, including the great modern civil rights movement, every defeat contains the seeds of a future victory. And as awful a setback as that day was, a day that W.E.B. Du Bois described in writing as a day on which Americans of color were first tasting freedom. That's where we got our book title. The seeds of many future victories were planted. The children of Caddo's generation and the grandchildren went on into the late 19th century and early 20th as courageous civil rights activists. Caddo's fiancée, an equally, if not more courageous activist, Carolyn LeCount, led the fight, along with Caddo and others, to integrate the streetcars. She's now widely considered the Rosa Parks of that struggle. And she didn't stop, when her fiancé was assassinated. She was principal of a Black school and stayed in that position all the way through to 1911.
That school was just a block north of South Street at 20th and Lombard. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Philly had the second largest African-American population in the country, and it was centered in the 7th Ward, where South Street was. A young W.E.B. Du Bois, the acclaimed sociologist and historian, conducted the first ever study of African Americans in the 7th Ward. He found that despite lacking investment and being marked by poverty, the area was a hotspot for Black-owned businesses. The area included restaurants and grocery stores, schools, barbershops, and a hardware and furniture store. By the 20th century, the Black South Street community flourished, and the area became a hub for entertainment. People saw shows at the Standard Theater at 1126 South Street. It hosted Black actors in vaudeville acts, like the Brown Skin Models, known as the Black Rockettes. Later, jazz legends Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington headlined. But by the mid-century, city planners led by a famous actor's father tried to put an expressway right through South Street, which would have destroyed it. At the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, communications coordinator Selena Austin showed me some artifacts from this time period.
We're looking at photographs from multiple collections. We're looking at ephemera from the South Street Museum, which was sort of a makeshift pop-up museum from the 1970s. And among that collection, there are all types of things, printed material from newsletters and newspapers to business cards and flyers.
Okay, so let's walk through the collection.
Sure. We have a couple of publications here now, the South Street Star and the South Street Gazette. We are also going to look at some older documentation of South Street today, things from the 19th century too. So in the 1950s, there was a city planner named Edmund Bacon who...
Wait, from the Kevin Bacon family?
Yes, he's Kevin Bacon's father. And Kevin Bacon, known for being from Philadelphia and like Footloose and other things, but known for being from Philadelphia. And so Edmund Bacon as a city planner is sort of leading this idea that we need to build an expressway that runs from the Schuylkill to the Delaware to sort of move traffic out of the city streets.
The redevelopment of a significant part of a city presents an entirely different problem from that of designing an individual building or group of buildings. Here we must think in terms of a total design concept. We must relate to an overall design structure. We have found in our work in rebuilding Philadelphia that a central design idea, well developed and clearly expressed, can of itself become a major creative force and can make more meaningful the work of individual architects in various parts of an area.
So there's a lot of traffic in Center City. And this brings back the question of the border and what is Center City and what isn't. And wanted to bring an expressway in that would sort of take some of that traffic out of the area, connecting 76 with the I-95. So they come up with this plan called the Crosstown Expressway to do this. And this is a time in the 1950s that South Street is a little bit in a downfall. People are moving out. It's not as vibrant as it once was, like it was in the beginning of the 20th century. But there is still a lot of people who are opposed to this. There are concerns that this is going to wipe out a neighborhood. There are concerns that this is going to erase community. And the people come together and they battle this concept of the Crosstown Expressway. They form a neighborhood preservation coalition, and there are different groups who come together and they continue to fight this. And it goes on for many years, over time, over decades, really, over different mayoral periods, and eventually in the 1970s, and by this point Edmund Bacon had sort of changed his mind. The project is done away with. They had opposed it long enough. They had faced enough obstacles over time, over 2 decades of protests, that they were not going to do this. Now we know in 1989 they completed the construction of the Vine Street Expressway, which sort of took its place and cut right through Chinatown as we know it, which connects, again, the Schuylkill Expressway to the I-95. But there was a lot of community resistance toward the Crosstown Expressway, and ultimately it did not go through.
I'm trying to even picture what this would have looked like if it would have went through.
So here is a picture of, this is a flyer from the Neighborhood Preservation Coalition, what the ramp would have looked like. And it would have started at Bainbridge. So Bainbridge and South Street. And this is a chart from the City Planning Commission. So there would also be a ramp at Lombard and South, which is like, if you've ever been to Lombard and South, that's, a busy place for pedestrians, especially. It's a walkable area, and this probably would have taken away part of that element. I mean, look at the Vine Street Expressway. It's walkable per se around that area, but I don't really, you don't really want to cross around that intersection.
I don't want to walk there, The South Street Expressway project idea was finally defeated in the 1970s because Philadelphians, specifically South Street's own gritty activists, successfully pushed back. Since the threat of the expressway led many businesses and people to pack up and leave the area, the fight to preserve the street and revitalize it became known as the South Street Renaissance. I'm looking at the South Street Star, and it traces the origin of Philly's restaurant renaissance to South Street. We're also going kind of through a restaurant renaissance throughout the city here. So that's kind of cool. This was happening in 1981.
Yeah, that sounds right. South Street really was, especially in the early 20th century, a prominent area for people to go shopping, to go out to eat, to go see shows. There was definitely an entertainment aspect to South Street. And then by the 1950s, especially with the plans for the Crosstown Expressway, a lot of people started to move out of the area with the prospect that their homes were going to be razed. They, believed to move elsewhere. So there was a moment in time where South Street is facing a lot of issues of empty housing and empty buildings and a stint of poverty in the area. And by the 1960s, really, people start to come together to try to revitalize the area. You see the birth of the South Street Renaissance. So this I can definitely see. Bringing restaurants and businesses back into the area would be part of sort of its renaissance. The South Street Renaissance is really like a sort of cultural movement There are a lot of theaters on South Street and there's a lot of artists living in the area. There's the Theater of Living Arts, which opened in 1960 by two women on South Street and was a really, really prominent theater for the years that it was open. It did not stay open for very long, but people like Morgan Freeman and Danny DeVito performed at the Living Arts Theater, the papers of which now live here for that collection. But that really brought a lot of people back into the area and was part of this South Street Renaissance in the 1960s and 70s.
During the history of South Street, what was actually considered, quote unquote, the South Street? Was it the east side? Was it the west side? Was it both?
It was definitely both, and you'll see that a lot in the archival records of how people identified. I think culturally, they may have been different, the east side from the west side. We know a lot about the Black populations living on the west side of South Street. That doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't on the east side, because they were as well. But it definitely is both. It's sort of this weird entity that borders Center City. Some people consider it to be Center City. Some people consider it to be the line of demarcation that separates Center City from South Philadelphia. And so I think it's really up to the interpretation of what you want it to be, because South Street is sort of malleable like that.
Tomorrow, we'll explore the early music scene and Black community that shaped the west side of South Street. That's all for us today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think about this South Street series so far. Give us a call or send us a text at 215-259-8170. And make sure you come back tomorrow for part 2. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to stay connected with us through the Hey Philly newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll talk to you tomorrow, Philly. Bye.